You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now, it's our turn.
A very warm welcome to this Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock in the northwest of England and here on the shores of Skegness. Good luck to everybody who's attending that evening in Ashton. And thanks for Rob Freeman for letting me do his show while he's not here. So it's Andy Peacher and Kevin Bull, the Earth News Rebel Show on Critical Mass Radio. Please join us in the chat box. That's on www.criticalmassradio.co.uk. Middle to the left, and you'll find where people are typing. A very warm welcome to you, Kev.
Hello, Andy. Nice to be on the show again.
Yeah, there's no sign of, I guess, so we're just going to have to work it out as we go along. Shall we have a bit of music, play the show intro, and then...
That sounds a good idea.
Yep, there we go. Now, one thing I wanted to talk to you about quickly before me and Kev gets on with business is the anonymous protest outside of Rochdale Social Services at the town hall there, I guess, you know, the city council's offices. It's going to be against the social workers there allowing all this abuse, sexual abuse to happen towards the children there. I've managed personally to get BBC Northwest going down that direction, so that's fantastic. But I just want to play this little anonymous audio just to advertise the event.
We are anonymous. We are one. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. Rochdale Council are guilty of corruption at the highest level. They need to resign. The reason being they blatantly ignored child abuse for the last 20 years. Not just one case, nor two, nor even three, but hundreds of cases of vulnerable children being taken by gangs of up to 20 men to be used for sex. The council is there to protect and has a legal duty to protect these vulnerable children. It failed in its duty to do that, and as such, its position is untenable. Therefore, Anonymous respectfully request they respect the democratic process and subject themselves to it. They must resign and inform the Electoral Commission of their decision to all resign and kickstart the democratic process in Rochdale. This is the only tenable and logical outcome of this scandal. Expect us on Thursday, the 4th of October, 2012, 9 a.m. to 4.
Sorry guys, I pressed the button a little bit early. It's 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So well done to Mr. Anonymous. No guessing in the chat box who that might have been. He made it very obvious, didn't he, with his accent. But anyway, I can also tell you of another protest, a miniature one going on outside the Lincolnshire County Council on Friday with me, yours truly, and a couple of families. I'm just supporting them. Because, you know, I can and I do. I go on radio shows, I email people, for people, I write letters, I get artwork done. It's because it's my duty. I have to do it. Kevin, so Paul Manning's standing by to have a little chat about his case and what happened in court the other day. And then we'll get on to a bit legal and a bit social services, yeah?
Yeah, it's lovely.
Or was it medical?
Well, we'll play it by ear. Shall we be flex throughout the show and jump all over the place and see where we go? It'd be nice to have Paul on. He's a grand chap, and his speech at Trafalgar was brilliant. I did enjoy listening to that in the Truth and Hope rally down there in Trafalgar on Saturday. I don't know if anyone listened to the rally. The video was well circulated on Facebook, and it was probably one of the best rallies we've seen down there, Andy. What do you think?
Absolutely, and I was very amazed to hear John Hemmings say I've got to go because I'm going on the Andy Peter show, and and for somebody like that to remember my name is awesome, as I say. It was coming on the actual America station with Orion, but he has confirmed today that he will come on Critical Mass Radio. It's just a matter of scheduling it to a time to suit him. So don't forget, guys, we're not just on filling in on Wednesdays. We're on Friday nights, our regular slot, 7 to 9, and a new regular slot, 6 to 8 on Sundays. So John Hemmings is really happy that, you know, Critical Mass Radio has slots over the weekend when he's not busy in Parliament. We've also heard today from Ian Josephs, and he wants to come on again onto this station. So, yeah, it's all looking good.
It certainly is. We were fortunate enough to have John on the US side on the Ryan Talk Radio. I know we didn't get it on Critical Mass. We couldn't do the two shows together with Trafalgar Falling on the Saturday. But we are going to do a show on Critical Mass, as you say, with John Hemming on, and another one with Ian on as well. But it was interesting about his new bill, some of the proposals in his new bill that he's putting through, that hopefully might get some changes. I did notice John was quite clear in the interview that he didn't want to go too far to scupper the chances, and that's why he's targeted the bill to get some movement in that direction. And some important factors, which anyone can pick up the archive on that and see where he's going in that direction. The Orion Talk side of things, I know we had, you know, the only possibility was to do it on the one at that time. But what we'll do the same show again a little bit later on, Andy, and see if we can get it together, eh?
Yeah, and some good news for Critical Mass Radio listeners and our loyalty to the show and to the station. We're doing our own Earth Needs Rebels End of the World show on Friday the 21st of December 2012. So that should be good, and we're hoping to do a duplicate the next day on Orion, because hopefully by then we're still here. So that'll be also cool. It's on Facebook if you want. Facebook, the Earth Needs Rebel show, End of the World show, I should say.
The thing that came out at the Trafalgar Rally this time, Brian Clare spoke as well. Brian Clare's been on the show and revealed an awful lot in a really good interview on institutionalised abuse. And, you know, the picture is starting to become more open, that children are being taken really from good parents, that really only potential arguments in many, many cases of risks that are done on a medical basis. And then they finish up being in the care system, which really isn't working. To take them from homes with only potential arguments and place them in a care system that isn't working, where the abuse is awful, we hear so many cases of children terribly affected, just does not make sense at all.
No, that's absolutely right. And obviously, our guest Paul Manning, he can show us where the system still lets him down, even though this isn't a social service case. Paul, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes,
good evening, Kevin. How are you? Are you okay, Kevin?
I'm fine, Paul. It's nice to have you back on the show, my friend.
Well, it's nice to be here, and good evening to you, Andy, and anybody who's listening. I'm not sure of the outreach of this show, but I hope that there's thousands of people listening to what we're saying. I just wanted to back up what Kevin said down at Trafalgar Square. I had a wonderful day. It was a nice, clear day, no rain. We had a good event. Managed to take part in a walking protest from Hyde Park Square all the way down back to Trafalgar Square, where we shouted our lungs out at the passing crowd to try and make them aware of what the hell's happening in our country in regard to the child stealing that's going on. I don't really think that they were aware of anything, because obviously, like I often say, unless this issue touches you in your own personal life, you don't have the hell idea of what's going on. But when it touches you in your own life, you realise the misery, the corruption, the wrongfulness, the injustices of what's going on. And once it's touched me for this last 4 years, it's certainly touched my life. That's why I've dedicated the rest of my life to being a campaigner for this issue. But we had a great time in London. I shouted my lungs out at the crowd.
I know you did, Paul. I listened to it.
I remember saying, I'm going to shout at you because I'm good at it. And I just looked at the video online just now, and I found that rather embarrassing that I'd said such a thing. But I feel strongly about this issue, and I'm not going to be stopped from getting the message out. Right, I'm not sure what the theme's going to be tonight, but I've listed quite a few things I wanted to sort of touch upon. But I'll give it back to you, Andrew, and see where we're headed.
Well, at the moment, because you're our guest, I guess, Kevin, if you're in agreement, we'll talk about what Paul wants to talk about, and then we see if we can expand it.
Tonight, Paul, what we're going to do, the show is totally flexible, so we can take it anywhere we like, and anyone that's on the chat can also steer the show as well. So if they want to raise issues and that, we're going to go there. We're going to try and explore all areas. So let's have a bit of fun tonight and go anywhere and not tie the show down in any way.
That's a good idea. So I guess if anybody who's listening in on the side has some concerns, you're feeling like you don't know who to turn to, you feel that you're alone, you feel that you have no one to support in your case or your issues, then give us a call. I'm sure Andrew won't mind me saying that. Just call in, because I think we really need to support one another. I mean, I need support in my case. I don't know if I can just spend a minute talking about... I went to my final hearing on Monday, as you may be aware, Kevin.
Yes.
In court for my final hearing that, as I've mentioned, I've been battling for 4 years now. The strange outcome of my case wasn't concluded because it was adjourned. It was adjourned because of something I did, and it was adjourned because I eventually sacked my barrister at the hearing. My barrister, Liz Isaacs, was not really wanting to make the points towards the CAFCAS officer, a Miss Jackson, or to the psychological expert, a Miss Croxon. In my private discussions with her, I pointed her in certain directions that she might want to take in exposing what I would consider fabrications. My barrister made it plain she wasn't willing to dwell on certain issues, which I thought were critical to my case. It got to the point where I said, look, dear, I really would like you to bring these points out. She stopped me and said, please do not call me dear. And she got rather snotty and upset that I'd called her dear. At that point, I thought her empathy for me had gone out the window. Not that I'm looking for empathy.
Somewhat lacking.
Well, I thought that for her to say that to me after 4 years of struggling and going through rather, sometimes I have to admit, states of depression over what I've been through, for her to turn around and to consider her own feelings rather than for a client really told me something about her. And at that point, I'd not had that much confidence in her for the last 18 months. And I turned around and said, look, I'm sorry, Miss Isaacs, but I'm sacking you. And she was rather shocked. And she walked out of the room, and as she went out, she said, look, you need to consider that, Mr. Manning. She came back and she said, have you reconsidered? I said, no. I said, with great respect, I'd like to take you off my case. We went into court. The barrister addressed the judge and said, Mr. Manning has relieved me as his barrister. The judge then said, you need to go outside and think about this seriously, Mr. Manning, because you will be without representation. So we went outside. I spoke to my barrister again. She tried to encourage me to take her back on. I had no confidence in her at all whatsoever, so I said no.
I understand that.
So I then went back into court. To cut a long story short, I said to the judge, look, Your Honour, surely you must agree, if I don't have confidence in my barrister to put up a fight for me, then it's only fitting that I dispose of her. And actually, he agreed. He says, that's true, Mr. Manning. In principle, if you don't have confidence, then why should you be represented by someone you don't have confidence in? But then he said, however, he said, the case is going to go ahead. he said, either you represent yourself or the case will go ahead. And my ex-partner was representing herself. She had not got a barrister or a solicitor. She was prepared to represent herself. I then said to the judge, well, I'm not prepared to represent myself. I am going to sit here and you can carry on with the hearing. I said, but I want it to be known that if you carry on with the hearing, I will apply to Judge Thorpe in London at the appeals court, and I will appeal on the basis that you did not allow me representation or further time to get representation. And he then said, you are placing me in rather an odd position, Mr. Manning. I said, I'm not being difficult, Your Honour. I said, I just feel that I'd rather have a barrister, but I am not willing to represent myself today. He then said, are you sure you're not wasting court's time? I said, I am not wasting court's time. I said, I haven't been fighting for 4 years to be wasting court's time in seeing my son. So he changed his mind and said, okay, you have 10 days adjournment to find yourself another barrister. So that's where I am at this moment in time.
Right.
And I have now appointed another barrister. And you may know him, Kevin, I'm not sure, but I would really like anybody who knows about him to call in and tell me how good he is. But I'm told he's very good. I think his name is Michael Bailey. He was recommended to me by Ian Josephs. I contacted Ian Joseph, and he said, Michael Bailey's very good. Try and see if you can get him. So I have managed to retain his services, and now he's my barrister.
So he's stepping on the record.
Sorry?
So he's stepping on the record for deputy.
Yes, but unfortunately I don't have the time to go and see him within 7 days, and he doesn't have a slot where I can go down to London to see him. So unfortunately I will only have conference with him by phone, which is not the best, because I'd like to have shown him certain documents. But that's where I am about within my case. I find it rather fantastic. The judge who was going to go ahead with the hearing suddenly decided to change his mind once I had mentioned Judge Thorpe, one of the High Court judges in the appeal court, as though I was threatening him. I wasn't threatening him. I was just saying I would appeal on the basis of not having representation. And I think he saw that point quite well.
I don't think he saw it as threatening him. I think he was trying to allow, from what you're saying, you made your argument. That's the point. You have to make an argument in court. People don't often realise this. It's not for the judge to draw the conclusion. It's for you to make the argument. You made a clear argument. You were right to make the argument, and he accepted it. Yeah. And that's why you got your 10 days, because of what you said.
Yes. Well,
Paul, a message in the chat box.
Yeah.
Is Mr. Bailey's very good. He's often busy, but he does listen.
Oh, good. Who was? Is that from? I think I know that's who. Is that from Maggie?
No, it's not. No, it's from Katie. Somebody.
Katie Grant. I wonder if that's my solicitor. Well, I have my solicitor who I have quite a lot of confidence in. She's quite good. She's from William Bish and Co. in Wiltshire, and she's been quite good actually. While at court, my barrister, who I'd sacked, a Miss Liz Isaacs, suggested that I would also have to sack my solicitor. And
no.
I don't know why she was trying that on, because I don't think that's the case. I didn't want to sack my solicitor. I just wanted to sack my barrister. So I still retain my solicitor, who I have quite a lot of confidence in. And Katie said, no, I said, are you still willing to represent me in lieu of the fact I've dumped the barrister that you have appointed? And she said, indeed, Mr. Manning, I will still represent you. So I found that rather encouraging, actually.
You've got a good relationship with your solicitor, by the sounds of it.
I have a good relationship. Sometimes
it's not up to your barrister whether the solicitor stands down. It's up to your solicitor. And she's decided to back him, hasn't she?
Well, I think she has. I think it's true to say, I have to be careful here, but it's true to say that I have a suspicion that my solicitor was agreeing with the many points I was trying to make to the barrister in our discussions. But she was scared to say so in front of the barrister. But in private discussions outside, I said, did I do right to sack my barrister? And she said, Mr. Manning, you did right if you feel you did right. And I can't condemn you for that, because if you don't have confidence in your barrister, then certainly you can get rid of her. And I said, did you see the logic of my points? And she said, I did see the logic of your points. So that told me that even my own solicitor could see the logic of the attack of what I wanted. That's the wrong word, attack. The proposition of my case, but the barrister couldn't. It seems to me that this barrister was so engaged with sparing the judge's time and not wanting to make the judge angry. In fact, the time she said to me, the judge may become angry over that. And I felt like saying, well, bugger the judge. Let's go down that route. And it's not for him to be angry if it's a logical point. But she seemed to be wanting to spare the judge all the time. And I would suggest that is because she's being called very shortly to be a judge herself in researching what she's going to be doing in the next 6 months. But I understand she's going to be a judge herself. So I got the impression that she was trying to ingratiate herself with the judge.
I know what you mean, Paul. I mean, we're mainly in the international law side, so we don't do so much in domestic law, but you see the same issues there. It's the court protocol between the legal teams that's there that they can't avoid. You've got the solicitor, who is the interview level, then you've got what in foreign jurisdictions, the JC or the non-QC barrister in the UK. And then you've got what's called SCs in other jurisdictions, QCs in England. And it has an hierarchy of, if you've got a full legal team on with a QC, a JC, or a solicitor, they have to bow down to the most senior role. So your solicitor may totally want to support you, but can't go against the barrister on the case or the QC. So it's not a case of the solicitor not backing you. They just can't do that. Do you see where I'm coming from, Paul?
Can you enlarge on that, Kevin? I'm not sure if I understand that. Say that again. Would you mind?
What you've got is, in law, they have to work with each other in a specific way. So if you've got a solicitor on, let's deal with England, and it keeps it simple. If you've got a solicitor on, the moment you have a barrister steps on record, then the barrister has seniority. Yeah? Although the solicitor takes your instructions on interview, they have to approach the barrister, and the barrister rules. Yeah?
Yep.
Now, if your case develops and you need a QC, and you finished up, say, with a solicitor, a barrister, and a QC, which can happen, then it would be the QC that rules. So you have a situation then, as you're going to your solicitor and you're actually explaining what you want and what you want to find, that can be overruled by either the barrister or the QC if they view the case needs to be fought that way. Do you see where I'm coming from, Paul?
Yes.
But unfortunately, that leaves the game, shall we say, wide open, like you say, if there are other interests there, to massaging the court somewhat. Is that a way to put it?
Yeah, I understand that now, what you're getting at, yeah. I guess you're talking about sort of legal niceties and protocols that they seem to want to follow. I have to understand that, and it's something I haven't completely understood. For instance, in appointing my new barrister, when I rang his chambers, Mr. Michael Bailey's chambers, even though he was there, I wasn't allowed to speak to him. And I understood that because usually it's the solicitor that appoints the barrister. But the clerk who I spoke to would not allow me to speak to him directly, but said that he could only speak to the solicitor. For me, that's rather a trifle and rather a silliness to me, but I know that that's part of their protocol. So I contacted my solicitor and he was appointed. But may I ask you a question, Kevin? Is it true that a barrister may not talk to you unless you are with your solicitor?
It can be. So, to explain the situation, and it applies in domestic proceedings and it applies in international proceedings, you do get differences between jurisdictions, but in the main, let's deal with the UK and on this. Technically, if you're in court, what should happen is that if there is a question that would need the interview of the client, then that would be dictated to take place between the solicitor and the client. The solicitor would then brief the barrister, leave the QC out of it for now, and the barrister would then fight the case before the court. That's the protocol that should happen. So this is one of the reasons it's a bit of an archaic system, but this is one of the reasons why you can't easily instruct a barrister directly. You know, there are a lot of barriers to doing that, almost stopping that. So you've got to have a solicitor on the case to instruct the barrister. Yeah?
Yes. Right.
That's explaining, Paul.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Kevin. I wanted to, I don't know if I could bring in, if I could, I'd made a few notes here to do with experts and what I would like to call hired guns.
Too true.
Hired guns, yes. I have to be careful not to go on about my own case, but on researching reports, psychological reports, medical reports by experts, so-called experts, there seems to be a plethora of newspaper articles, not only by Christopher Booker but others, about many of these experts being exposed. And I found, for instance, a lady who was struck off by the HPC for 18 months. I think it's in the public domain, so I'm sure I can mention her name, Dr. Ruth Coppard, who'd diagnosed a father who was trying to gain access to his child. She diagnosed him with a condition which subsequently it was found out after he'd complained to the HPC that he did not have. In the hearing at the HPC, it would seem that she admitted that she'd manufactured this condition in aid of the mother, in that she sympathised with the mother and wanted the mother to have custody of the children and to prevent the father having contact. This matter was exposed in the newspapers. It was in the newspapers, I think it was a year ago now, probably, possibly a bit longer, but it made the news. Dr. Ruth Coppard struck off by the HPC, which leads me, once I started to realise that many experts who are being appointed to these kind of cases, and in many cases to do with child proceedings and custody care of children who are in care pending outcomes of court cases, it would seem that there seems to be a plethora of these hired guns who are paid vast amounts of money, who seem to be biased in favour of the people who appoint them. And I've really got that impression. I don't know if it's the impression you got, Kevin.
I think you nailed it, to be quite honest, Paul. When you actually haven't been part of the legal process, then you really are left with whatever the media feeds you or whatever your connections feed you. But when you've been part of the process like you have for 4 years, you realise things aren't working as they should do, really. And sadly, the experts that are called are chosen very carefully to, shall we say, benefit one side or the other. It's more obvious in public proceedings where you've got the state on one side, social services, shall we say, local authorities, that the actual experts just totally favour that side. And the problem we've got with this is that if you think about it, these experts make their money as expert witnesses. So if they make the money as expert witnesses and they start to appear and give evidence in the cases, if they start to give evidence that is balanced or not in the interests of the parties that call them to give evidence, shall we say social services, or which can be in privacy proceedings when you've got a section 47 and that, we're going to finish up with a situation where experts are giving evidence that isn't favourable to the people that are calling them. Now, if that happens, they're not going to get called again, are they? As you'd understand, they're not going to make their money in the gravy train of being called as expert witnesses, and the amount of money involved can be as much as £28,000 for filing a report. So we've got a situation that any experts appearing before the court know that particularly if they're being called by the state side of things, if they start to give evidence that favours the parent, they're not going to be called very often, or they may not be called again. So the incentive is the money in this. It's the gravy train that Maggie Tuttle has spoke about, where we've got a gravy train going and people making money on the gravy train know which way to play the cards, otherwise they're not going to be in the gravy train. It's as simple as that, Paul.
Kevin, can I just say, because we get stats of who are visiting us at any one time, and there's a person in Arizona looking at the website at the moment, so if you want to call in Mr. or Mrs. Arizona, we're on 347-326-9530. That's a US number, Canada, 347-326-9530. I like to keep it international.
Go for it. Do you see where I'm coming from, Paul, here? It's a bit of a gravy train for the actual money paid to these expert witnesses.
Yes, it is. Actually, to give you an example, Kevin, of my own case, let me just tell you this. You're going to find this absolutely fascinating, and all the listeners may... The degree as to how much it is a gravy train is... I went to see actually, I don't like to call her a doctor because her report was so appalling. I didn't like to give her the title of doctor. Miss Croxon, but she's allocated as a doctor, as a psychologist. Miss Croxon was allocated the sum of £5,000 to give a report about me and about my ex. And she was told by the court it would be limited to £5,000. She saw my ex for a few hours and terminated her appointments with her and found that she didn't need any more information. She then had an appointment with me. That lasted for 4 hours. Then she had another appointment with me, which lasted for 4 hours. Then she applied to court because she said she needed to see me again and applied for more money. This is a fact. I was outraged at this. A letter was sent to the court asking the judge to extend her amount of money she could claim, and it was extended, get this, to £10,000. It was doubled because she said she needs to see me again. This woman ended up with over £10,000 plus VAT for this report. That's how bad it's got. Over £10,000. And given that I am now on legal aid at this moment, and given that my case has been going on for 4 years, given that these experts have seen both parties, I've totted up that the amount of money spent in my case has been over £250,000. Paid to barristers, I've had 4 different barristers. Paid to different solicitors, I've had 3 different solicitors. Paid to her solicitors, paid to her barristers, and totting it all up, it's probably exceeded £250,000. And if anybody thinks that this is not a gravy train, I can assure you it definitely is.
I think when you spoke at Trafalgar, Paul, I think the contact charges spelt it out really. I don't know if you want to explain those again, because this is the latest wave of things now with contact charges, CAFCAS involvement as well, are absolutely outrageous, aren't they, Paul?
Well, I've got, funny you should mention it, I've still got that document, I keep it in front of me. It disgusts me every time I look at it. I've got it in front of me now, and I waved it around in Trafalgar Square, and 1 or 2 people came to look at it, and they found it shocking to look at. This was an invoice that I'm looking at this second. It's an invoice from a company, quite a big company, becoming bigger and bigger. Belongs to the core group of companies, which are quite worldwide actually. But this is from a company called Core Children's Services, and it says letter of contracts and terms between Core Children's Services and Mr. Paul Manning, and it lists the things I can and cannot do while at contact. It lists expenses that these people can claim in transportation, expenses for public transportation if needed to be used. And not only does it say that there will be one person, for some reason they've organised 2 supervisors, when one could have done this, but no, they want to appoint 2. The total sum is, and get this, wait for this, £726.
For 2 hours.
That is for 2 hours. 700, and anybody listening out there wants a copy of this, I don't care anymore, you're welcome to a copy. £726 to see my son, who I've never harmed in my life, and I couldn't dream of harming. By the way, that would have exceeded £726 had Cafcass ordered contact reports to be written, which would have they were going to charge another £80 on top of that for the contact report. That would have brought the bill to £826. Sorry, £800 to be honest. So it obviously got to the situation where the Cafcass officer, who I was not getting along with, decided that she wanted to wear me down to such a degree, because I was, previous to this, receiving this invoice, I was paying £75 for 2 hours. I could hardly afford that, but I was paying the £75. I found it degrading to do that, but I did. There was no way I was not going to see my son. But after paying quite a sum of money, £75 a time, I then was hit with this huge sum of £700, which the Cafcass officer knew I couldn't possibly pay. And to be honest with you, I not wanted to be too critical of her, if that's possible. That's why I think she sent it to me. I think she wanted me to give up and go away. But I didn't go away. I'm still here today. I'm still fighting.
I think you've done well to stick it out, Paul, to get through it. Of course, we know how social services work. We know how Cafcass works. And the moment that someone can't afford to pay these fees, they will then claim they're not engaging with the children, they're not doing this, they've abandoned them or anything they like, without showing the true picture that they're trying to charge such a massive amount of money. It's impossible to maintain the contact. So
yeah,
you can see they're trapping you between two things by upping the price to try and force you to appear in your case like you're not attentive to your children.
Yeah, it's true. Sorry, go ahead, Andy. I don't want to hog.
I was going to say we're going to have a break in a second, but on that subject of charging people, well, it's totally the opposite in our case. I suppose it's because there's been a parental rights order in place for at least a year now, and what they do is, and it does make me angry because they're giving me, I'm going up to see my kids on the 18th, well on the 16th now, contact on the 18th to see one of the children, Aaron, and they're giving us first class rail, 4 5-star hotel, dinner, bed and breakfast, and the bill, that they're wasting is about £600. Now when I lived in Somerset, they used to do the rail again, and they used to do overnight in Carlisle or Glasgow before Inverness, and it was reaching £2,000 for contact. So in the end, I basically jumped up and down. I threatened them with the Treasury. I said, look, there's a plane there that goes from Bristol, Inverness, there's a bed and breakfast there, 400 quid, maybe 5, let's have that. Now, if they're spending 600 on 4 stars and first class, I just let them do it because it's not a lot of extra wasted. But when I was in Somerset, I just thought that's shocking because that £2,000 could be spent on other people. So we'll go in for a little break and a little jingle, which I forgot to play actually, this one.
CMR Critical Mass Radio in association with We Are Change Manchester and Freedom Northwest. Please note the views and opinions expressed by the hosts on this show are not necessarily the views held by the station. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it's our turn.
Right, we'll just have a little music break and then we'll be back in about 3 minutes. So please mute everybody. You're listening to the Avenues Rebel Show with Andy Peter and Kevin Bull, live every Friday night, 7 to 9, and Sunday, 6 to 8. We stand in on a Wednesday. And can I just repeat, Lincolnshire Social Services, we're having a protest on Friday, starting at about 10:30, and we're going to be there with a lovely family. It's a free Evie campaign, it's a free Aaron and Kirsty campaign, and it's to show them that they can't gag people. Please, everybody, show some support also for Rochdale tomorrow. Metropolitan Council, Anonymous is going to be there, so expect them. Definitely, we've got to stop all this abuse, because we'll be too old, and then what's going to happen? We're just going to be too old, so we need to do it while we're still 40-odd. Let's go for it, innit? Yeah, maybe we'll get a change, maybe we won't get a change, but I always think that the change will come, depends how hard you try. So that's why the Avenues Rebels, and we are change, because we will be one day.
Yes, Paul, in your situation, you might be able to get with having new legal counsel on a little bit more time for your counsel to form the case and take everything in. Is Paul still with us, or has he dropped?
I'm here now. Say that again, Kevin. I didn't quite catch that.
Yes, with having new counsel on only for 10 days, when they go before the judge, depends on the judge's views, they might be able to request for a little bit more time to form the case, because it's not a lot of time, when you rise up against a final hearing to form a case. But it'll be dependent on the judge as to whether they can get more time. But I do note you were looking to try and bring in a late witness. That needs to happen very early. You need to make sure you get this through to your solicitor and to make this application to the other side, to the court on the other side, to not cross over any notice periods this time.
Yes. Hopefully, the judge might have considered giving me more time than he has, just the 10 days. But he made a point of saying, when I was in court last Monday, I assure you, Mr. Manning, the hearing will go ahead on the 10th. There will be no delays, because he did point out, he said after 4 years, he said this case needs to be terminated and a definite decision made, and he assured me it would go ahead. So I don't think he's going to give me any more time, and I'm frightened to actually apply for more time. Although I would like, it seems rather strange that I won't be able to see my barrister face to face before I get there on the 10th. Which I won't be, which will be a great disadvantage to me. I don't really anticipate much hope of having contact with my son, and no one to this day has told me why. No one's actually said to me, Mr. Manning, this is what you have done, because I know I've done nothing. But it seems to me that not wanting to make this an issue of gender, and I would never want to do that, because I have represented mothers, I've had mothers crying on my shoulders. I feel sorry for them. I'm not saying that this is just about fathers. It's certainly about mothers and fathers. And I know that many parents have wrongfully had their children removed. So I can't honestly say it's a matter of gender. What I can say is in the private law, I think, I'm going to get shot down for this if people are listening, I think there is a tendency for the judges to be slightly, that's an understatement, to be biased in favour of the mother, and to me that's a conclusion I've come to. But I'm only saying that that's in private law cases. It would seem that my ex has had every sympathy awarded to her. She is not allowing me to know of her new residence. She's moved home. I've applied to know where she lives so I can write. She doesn't give the address, so I can't write direct. I have to write my letters to various other intermediaries who will forward the letter for me. I've asked the judge why I can't know of the address, and the judge agrees with her. but for no reason. It's not that I've ever been to a residence or ever would. But it seems to me every sympathy has been given to her. But that's again talking about my own case, and I don't want to dwell on that on too much. But I did want to talk about what changes of the law that Mr. Hemming is bringing about.
Yeah.
And I've just looked at. I have it in front of me, a copy of his initiative. And I've been talking to a lawyer this last few days about the idea that he feels that this is not strong enough, his new initiatives, and that really it won't better the law for children at all, or for parents who have wrongfully had their children taken. And he pointed out to me, and this is something I didn't know, he pointed out to me that at this moment in time, there is, at any given moment, on the average of 125,000 children in care. 125,000 children in care. So that would be then that there's 125,000 children being removed from their parents. But when you go and look at the actual statistics for prosecutions against parents who've had their children removed, there are not 125,000 prosecutions. Researching it would seem that there is only 5,000 parents in the last 8 years that have been prosecuted or convicted for harming their children. So if you see the imbalance of 5,000 parents who have been prosecuted, but there are 125,000 children in care, why isn't the prosecution status in balance with the amount of children that are in care? It must mean then that the greater majority of parents who've had their children taken have not been prosecuted. They have not had been taken to a high court where it's been proven that they've harmed their children. And I see the logic of that. And for me, I would suggest an initiative that if there is any concerns regarding children, abuse or neglect, that then rightfully the police should intervene. The police should intervene if there is evidence of neglect and abuse of a child. And what could happen then is while the proceedings, the police prosecute, the children could be taken into temporary care while the police prosecute in the High Court or Magistrates' Court. If it is that the parents are found guilty, then they have something in front of them, a proper prosecuted court order saying they have done thus and so. If they are found innocent, then there is no case to answer. The social services should give the children back. And I can understand why John Hemming has not taken a more of a legalistic role in his initiative. And I would put forward that idea myself.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Andy.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying there, Paul, is what Ian Joseph said was a good idea 50 years ago, should be happening today, where it should be a criminal court for the family system rather than the family system. Also, you mentioned some figures, 5,000 people that's probably been charged. Now, out of all them 90,000, 125,000, whatever the number is, there's billions of pounds, not millions, but billions spent on this childcare system. If you divide, I always say this, but no one's got an answer, you divide the kids in care to the money spent looking after them, where the dickens is all that money going to?
Well, that's a very good point, Andy. In fact, in reading what, I mean, I was in discussion with another lawyer about this, but he said that the government could save quite a few billion in not having these children in care if they were to take a more prosecution process towards parents. And I'm not suggesting that parents should be prejudiced by going to court. I think it's to their advantage that they are prosecuted if there is reasonable evidence that they've harmed their children. Then those children would not be put in care. But the way we have it now is there are 125,000 children in care on the average, but there are parents out there who have not been prosecuted. Nothing has been conclusively proven. All we have is children in care on the basis of experts' opinions of emotional harm, which is, excuse my language, bloody well meaningless. It can mean anything, future emotional harm. So it must mean then that these parents must be living a nightmare who still don't know how they stand. They don't know what they've really done in law because they haven't been prosecuted. But there they live a living nightmare of not being able to see their children on the hunch that the social services think that those children might have been harmed or may be harmed. Now, that can't be right. That cannot be right. And the government could save billions if they would take those children out of care, give them back to their parents who have not been proven conclusively in a court of law that they have harmed their children. The money we could save could be put to other uses, and that's my point. And I can't understand why David Hemming has not put this in his bill.
Well, let's look at the picture of how this works first to understand what's going on. It's the difference in the criminal proceedings to the civil proceedings. In criminal proceedings, it has to be proved as a matter of fact that this has happened. Hearsay is not allowed. So when you hear a case or even decide to take a case against parents in criminal proceedings, this is the way it should be done in the children's proceedings in reality, that you have to prove that it's happened, that you have to prove as a matter of fact it's happened. That's what's so unfair about the civil proceedings in public law and in the privacy law side of things, that hearsay is admissible. And this means, and the obvious thing is in the statistics you're talking of, Paul, that hardly any parents are ever prosecuted. And it's because when it's tested against fact, they're found innocent. Or even earlier than that, it's looked at, from a public prosecution basis, and it's realised there's no point in taking the case against the parents because there's no evidence to support it. But then look at the picture when you've got social services involved, or you've got CAFCAS involved before the court in civil proceedings, and you've got a situation that you don't have to be proved to have done anything at all. It's sufficient for them in those proceedings, shall we say, to, at the bare minimum, really, to bring on an expert to say that they know of another expert who has said this about you. So all it takes is someone's opinion and no way of it being a requirement to prove it. Now, when it's someone's opinion, especially if it's hearsay and you've not got the person before the court, the doctor says another doctor has an opinion, you've then got a situation that you can't disprove it, because you've no way of challenging something that's a hearsay opinion when it's not based on facts. You can only disprove facts. You can only get assessments to disprove opinion. And if it's doctors in the NHS that are doing all the assessments and experts of this nature, they're not going up against each other. They're generally finding the findings the same way. Now, to take it a stage further than this, to get away from the NHS, to get away from the state, people have tried to bring in experts from America. They've paid money themselves, and the court has at best listened to them, but discounted the evidence and gone with their own experts, many of which have been found wanting and have been found to be corrupting their proceedings. So you've got that as a problem with parents as well. They're really disadvantaged. Then to take it to the next stage, even if a parent runs the gauntlet and is proved innocent in the proceedings and everything's ticked off on the court reports and everything, so the parent is no longer challenged in any way with the original allegations, to get their children back, they've then got to go through social services assessments that are really unfair. No other parent in the country has to go through those assessments. They don't understand what it's about, and most other people think that people in these child proceedings have done terrible things when they haven't. They're just ordinary parents, and most are completely innocent. So they run in the gauntlet of social services assessments, and as you know, Paul, these assessments just go on and on and on. If they get a positive assessment, a normal assessment, then you find social services want more assessments. then you get more assessments, and so it goes on with the judge asking for assessments. There was a case, it was known as the RSPCA case, where there were 5 psychological assessments on the father, and they went all the way down the line. I think it was published in the Daily Mail some years ago, and the poor little girl, I can't remember the name they used in the paper story, was finally adopted. And this then resulted, it was very well publicised, where there was nothing really found in the assessments with the father at all. He was just being asked over and over again continuously for years to have assessments. And that's the typical situation for parents. How unfair. The story was Jenny. It was about Jenny. It was in the Daily Mail. But how unfair can you get towards parents that are in these proceedings? Now, when we look at the comment section in papers, how they attack parents and the stories that are published in the papers, people are believing that people in these proceedings have done all these things. They're led to believe it with the brainwashing of the papers and everything else. They're not getting the true picture of what's going on. The only chance we've got to get in the true picture is through media like this, alternative media that we're running, to try to get the story across to people that most parents are completely bloody innocent in this. And they're just being assessed at a level that will ensure, even if they weren't in the proceedings, if you tested every parent in the country on the same rules, then you'd finish up with probably 70% of parents losing their children. And I'm sure they wouldn't be as critical as that as they are on the comment side.
Yeah, we've got some comments. Talking about comment side, Paul's going to talk in a second, but we've got one from Bob, and he's saying, how do you prove emotional abuse or neglecting the child, from the professionals kind of side? So that's question 1.
Yeah, that side, how do you prove emotional abuse? Or most of the cases are potential emotional abuse, really. All that they need to do, and I'll give you the extremes of this, say there was a case before the courts where perhaps they didn't have their parents there. How far would they go if they couldn't find anything factual evidence against the parents? What would they be likely to do to try and prove that something had happened to the children? Now, I'm talking from profiling. It's the only way I can do it from cases. I can't name cases. It's not possible because of the rules. But I can tell you that the willingness of the Court of England, they're quite willing to go and then employ experts to come and say, perhaps about children that are probably, 7 and 9 years old or something of that nature, and they'll get an expert to come on and corrupt themselves and say that that child must have been terribly harmed in some way when they were between birth and 2 years, when they were with the parents, shall we say. And those same children might have been in care all the way since, for say 3 or 4 years, and they would extrapolate things that far to blame parents who had been proved innocent in proceedings to keep those children. The question in all of this, and I'm acknowledging where Bob's going on this, is why would they extrapolate things so far? Why would they put parents in a gauntlet of testing after they've been proved innocent, instead of apologising and saying, I'm sorry we got it wrong, let's get your family together, let's support you, we've inconvenienced you.
When you're done, I've got another comment based on what you're saying.
Okay, the answer to that, John Hemming actually gave, Paul, when it was slipped in with the conversation. There were 2 points he made. One was arrogance, and the other one was not wanting to really recognise that they were wrong. So we've got people that are arrogant and not wanting to recognise they're wrong. Once someone comes before the court and they're proved innocent, they still, because of their power and secrecy, will not turn around and say, sorry, we got it wrong, we don't want to disturb your children and yourself, let's get you back together and support you. It's absolutely disgusting behaviour by the establishment and the state to behave this way. And there's no other word for it, because there are many, many cases that we've been on where we've seen good parents and we know they're innocent, and we get to this stage and they're running this gauntlet, and they still keep those children in care or place them for forced adoption even though the parents are proved innocent. It's disgusting. Please go on with your question, Andy.
Yeah, it's
Here, Kevin. Here. I have to agree with every word of that.
It's not so much a question, but more of a comment, and it's relative to what you said. There was a case a few years back. I have two comments, and that's all at the moment. Then Paul can go on. So there was a case a few years back where it was argued that the family should have been supported as opposed to the child being placed for adoption. But it was decided that as it would cost the local authority over £200,000 or dollars or whatever, euros to support the family, then the child could be adopted. And I like this comment even more, but whether it will happen, I think if the thousands of families have lost their children wrote to the Prime Minister and said, we'll vote for you if we get our kids back, what do you think he will do, and do you think he'll listen?
I could get enough people mailing in, it might help. I'd say that. But on your first part of the question, it is about money. Absolutely. There's so much of it being elevated. Now we're getting a closer picture on what's going on by everyone that's working to try and reveal some of this. And if you look at spending, 120,000 to 250,000 on supporting a family, shall we say, or something on that basis, or throwing the switch on the family and effectively selling the children in many cases into forced adoption, in the fact that the amount of money involved going the other way in the gravy train into the hands of these so-called parties that are functioning as part of this structure, then the preference for everyone involved is to make decisions that line their own pockets. And the family are totally lost in all of this. There are so many cases where we actually see this within the cases. People can't publicise. I try and write from profile basis on what's going off, and a lot of other people do. But I think Christopher Booker tries very hard to get the profile out. But you will just finish up with gagging orders if you try and name the individual circumstances in the cases. Now, the other thing John Hemming raised, and I'm going to come back to what you raised earlier, Paul, about why not press the button harder, is that the problem with foreign states, I don't think it's a problem actually, he didn't say that, foreign states having concerns is because of lack of transparency. And we've got the same issues. It's not transparent, we can't report it, we can't get anything out in the media, but we know why, because we're in the proceedings, because it's corrupt. The whole system is corrupt, it's a gravy train, and that's why it's in a blanket of secrecy. Before we even look at paedophilia and the other elements that are involved in this, we have a disgustingly corrupt child protection system that has become more and more that way because of the secrecy. And if the secrecy was lifted and we could have protection of children in such a way their identities were protected but everything else was visible, we might then start to stop the gravy train being aided by the secrecy to such an extent they can do as they like. The point that John Hemming was making was that it's arguable, I know, Paul, but what John was saying was that if he presses too many buttons, if he pushes too hard and too big a change, then he won't get the bill through at all. He's trying to get some change, and I think part of that, if you look at what he's trying to do, 15 people appearing as a maximum in the proceedings to sort of witness the proceedings and things like that, he's trying to increase the transparency of the proceedings. If we can increase the transparency of the proceedings, I can see where he's going, then we can turn the handle a little bit more and open up a little bit more. I think he's trying to do it step by step. Do you understand where I'm coming from, Paul?
Yeah, I'm not saying, I'm not saying I'm against his initiative at all. In fact, I'm backing it. I've spent some hours distributing some of his leaflets and some of the bills in people's letterboxes. I'm definitely for the initiative, but I just would have liked to have seen it to go a little bit further, that's all, in that, as I said before, just to confirm what the point I'm making, is that if there is an alleged abuse of children, then surely if a parent has abused its child, their child, then surely that is reason for a criminal prosecution. Therefore, if there is evidence that those parents have harmed their children, severely enough, then they should be prosecuted, as 5,000 have been already. Then it needs to be put into the hands of the police, and a prosecution go ahead. If it's found that the case is not proven, then those children should be given back to their parents. And I feel that would be an answer to the problem, rather than having this sort of unsure way, this pseudo kind of way of trying to get doctors' reports, opinions. There is no conclusive evidence. We just go along with what the doctors think. They don't really know for a fact. The children are then taken into care. There's no parents are prosecuted. It seems to be such a system open to such abuse and opinion rather than facts. As you've already pointed out, in the criminal courts, it isn't decided on the balance of probabilities. It's decided on proof and evidence that can be actually shown as facts. I feel that the same standard it should be applied to these parents who are being accused of abuse. And as for but I'm for the bill. But just reading from part of the bill preamble in regard to the secret courts, just reading it here, it says, quote, family courts sit in private to protect the anonymity, I can't say that word, anonymity of the child. But there is a danger that injustice in secret could allow injustice to children.
Yes.
That's a wonderful, but there is a danger that justice in secret could allow injustice to children. And that is what's happening. Too many parents are losing their children based upon opinions, facts that are not facts at all. But the knee-jerk reaction of the Social Security is saying, well, look, do we really want to take a chance? It might have happened, it might not. Well, look, let's just be sure. Let's take those children. Well, I'm sorry, social services, and if you're listening to this, you can't do that. You can't put a family in a lifetime's nightmare like Andy's been through. I haven't got to the lifetime yet. I've been at it 4 years. But I assure you, it is a nightmare when you lose your child and you don't know what the hell it is you're supposed to have done.
I think if you take, if I can, Andy, there's one of the Anon in the box, Anon 5861. Balance of probabilities is over 50%. Mine was 51% probability that we hurt our little girl. This is very typical. You have to remember, balance of probability is that fine. If it crosses the halfway mark, that's it in civil proceedings, but there's not a cat and mouse chance in criminal proceedings that you would finish up being found guilty on that basis, because you've got all hearsay in with that. You haven't just got facts, you've got hearsay. And most of the cases made by hearsay, as you know, Paul. Now, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. It should be based on fact. It's still protecting children. It should be based on fact. And it should be criminal prosecution as well. If child harm's occurred, it should be criminal prosecution. Now, it's noticeable in proceedings that really the criminal prosecutions don't occur, as you say, quite simply because there isn't sufficient of a case on a factual basis, at the very least, to make a case that will fly criminally. So the CPS don't take that forward, you know, and you then finish up just left with the civil proceedings.
So what we're saying then, Kevin, is that the standard of evidence provable is at such a lower ebb in the Family Proceedings Acts to do with children. It's at such a lower standard that it's basically left up to the hunch of the judge. But the standard of the criminal court is so much far superior. It's tantamount to saying then that the parent should say, no, I insist. It's tantamount to saying that the parent should say, no, I insist that you prosecute me. Please prosecute me. Oh,
absolutely. You've got a better chance.
Because I would stand a better chance in the higher court if you were to prosecute me. You see what I'm saying? It's absurd, isn't it?
Yeah. Do remember, Paul, that if you can, the best thing that could happen to anyone in child proceedings is if they're prosecuted. Because if they're prosecuted, you've got a factual case you can fight, and if you're innocent, you can fight to win. Okay, it's not guaranteed, but you fight to win. You are allowed to publish a lot of the information in a criminal case that you can't in child proceedings. And that then presents a problem for social services and the Court of England, in that if you do go for a case against persons criminally and you lose, you look a tit when you take the children on the civil proceedings on the balance of probability on the thinnest of evidence. It shows how ridiculous the childcare system is, the parallel between the two.
Yeah, I know of a case recently, and I know I've got to be careful about this, but I know of a case recently of a dear friend of mine who has two sons. She was recently gagged in a Lincolnshire court for campaigning.
I was going to say, Paul, let's go for the full hog. We're talking about Lewis and Ryan Freeman.
Yeah, Lewis and Ryan Freeman and their dear mother, Stephanie, who loves those children. I know her quite well now, and I know that she's never harmed her children, ever. In fact, as I said in London, in my grotesque shouting speech, that if a mother was to take a child to hospital because something was wrong with the child, it doesn't sound logical that a mother would actually take that child to hospital for something that mother had done to that child herself. It may be the case that she would. Maybe she's overreacted and hit the child and bruised the child badly, and if she loves the child, she would still go to the hospital. But if it is that we're talking about the type of parents that the social services are suggesting that they are bad people, why would a mother go to hospital with a child that she's harmed herself? I think we can take it for granted that mother has not harmed that child if she's taking that child of her own initiative to hospital. Well, this is one of those cases. Stephanie did that. She ended up losing her two sons.
Exactly. Sorry to interrupt there, Paul.
Yeah.
But there's a parallel here. Little Evie Grace is another Lincolnshire family. The girl called Luna, for legal reasons, she's went to the hospital down there in Boston and said, look, something wrong with my daughter's arm. Blah de blah de blah. She's got no children now. And in the third case, myself, Aaron and Kirsty, we asked for help because of medical undiagnosed problems, and then we've got no children. So it's very similar pattern.
Yeah, it's horrific. I sympathise with you, Andy. I really do. And let me tell you, I'm not embarrassed to say this. My heart goes out to all of you. And I'm supposed to be a narcissist, by the way. I'm labelled by the psychological report I've had as being a narcissist.
Paul,
I'm supposed to be a narcissist, and yet I don't know why, but I'm not boasting about that, but I have great sympathy for these parents, and it breaks my heart to see them suffer the way they do. But just before you speak, Kevin, I just wanted to say about Stephanie. She was gagged for 15 years. 15 years she has now been gagged in talking about her children or campaigning about her children, making any naming of her children in public. I am not gagged. Maybe they want to gag me as well, but I'm afraid I've got to the state of affairs where I won't be gagged, because I'm going to try and expose this horror that the social services are impinging upon parents. So if you're listening, Steffi, I will continue to fight for you. I've approached 2 MPs on your behalf. There are people who know about your case. There are people who think that for you to be caught gagged, injuncted to not campaign for your own children, what the hell is that? That is an injustice beyond belief.
I mean, also, Paul, you don't probably, well, you won't know because I'm not allowed to tell you, but the special powers within the world from very large organisations that are going to target, well, not target is the right word, but they are going to use Lewis and Ryan's campaign as a big publicity stunt, but it also helps people like Aaron and Kirsty, little Evie, And of course, we've not mentioned Tia and George.
Yes.
Tia and George, bless you. Bless you.
Anyway, Kevin, go on. I interrupted you. I do apologise.
If you comment on being a narcissist, which I'm sorry, Paul, but I have to laugh because I've heard you speak, and I've heard enough of you now. You may not know, but I've been a counsellor for many, many years. I work with clients with serious sexual abuse, satanic abuse. I work with male and female clients across the board, really, as well as legal abuse syndrome, and which is a product of going before the courts. So I can assure you, you do not demonstrate any narcissistic traits. A narcissist basically is a person that is mainly indifferent to other people's feelings, shall we say, and can even be indifferent to their own. But there is a second, shall we say, plateau on that, which is you can have narcissists that are fairly neutral, and you can have narcissists that are very elitist and arrogant, before we cross over to low empathy and psychopathy. And you are so not a narcissist. It's unbelievable, I assure you, Paul, because you clearly display empathy, and you are motivated by empathy as well. You're not motivated by selfish views, you're motivated by empathy. It's in everything you speak.
I wish you could, Kevin, my friend, I wish you could go and see Dr. Croxon and tell her that on my behalf, but I don't think you can get that chance. But
she maybe projected her own problem on you.
Well, when I saw her in court, I did have a little pop at her, and if anybody's listening, I don't care, but I went up to her and I said, "Thank you for your report, Dr. Croxon, but if anybody's the narcissist, it's you."
I think you're right.
Because to have actually judged a fellow human being so severely without actually knowing me in such a short time, in not actually knowing about my character and my ethics and what I believe in life, I say for you to have done that shows me that you put yourself up as some kind of godlike figure that you can condemn me as you have. She condemned me because she completely wiped the floor with me in this report. I'm self-centered. I'm not really. I don't care about my son. All this fighting I've been doing for 4 years is basically, she reported, is a way of bringing attention to myself and not to my son. So it's catch-22 for me. If I fight on, it's a way of bringing attention to myself, but not anything to do with me fighting to see my son. That's what she's put in the report.
Yeah.
How long were your assessments, Paul, in total hours?
With her,
yeah.
I would say 9 hours.
It's not sufficient. I'll explain to you why. There are low empathy disorders result in, and when I say low empathy, they're very wide-ranging. Excuse me. They range from, you can get low empathy as part of psychosis, low empathy in a range of disorders, and you can also get low empathy with narcissism and low empathy with psychopathic range disorders as well. Now, once a person develops low empathy, which is part of a narcissism, then they start to be able to think out in a way that ignores other people's feelings, and often their own as well. So once they start to do that, they become, shall we say, the Riddler, if you like. If you're trying to assess someone like that, and as part of counselling, I work with people with low empathy to try and improve the situation. While they've got empathy, they want to change it. When they haven't, and they've crossed the threshold, then they're not really interested, and they'll project on me just the same as anyone else. So to work with people with low empathy, you have to have them in the empathic side of their threshold. If they get stressed, they go the other way. So if we're looking at that, you'd understand that in order to assess someone as to whether or not they truly have a low empathy disorder or narcissism, which is very specific in your case, they're trying to say, then you're not going to easily get that in 9 hours. And that is because when they describe you as narcissistic, that's a hard condition. It's not a threshold condition where a person might cross over into low empathy and then come back out of it. So in 9 hours, this expert is supposed to have established this. Now, it won't take much research if you look into psychology to find how difficult it is for top psychologists to make these kind of assessments outside of child proceedings. You'll find that they'll be working with clients and still changing the diagnosis after a year or 2 years, because that's how difficult it is to assess someone as to where you would put them in a box exactly. Shall we say these boxes are created for people just to give it a name, but because people change as well, it's very, very difficult. So to make a diagnosis, like a pure diagnosis of narcissism in 9 hours, is ridiculous, and certainly doesn't fit you, Paul.
Can I do my
Thank you for that, Kevin.
Can I do my little thing, and then we've got about another 20 minutes, but I need to play something again. Sorry, guys. You're getting very, very warm and happy in that little cupboard there, but I've got to join everybody else, and they do want these little things to happen, such as this one.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
We are anonymous. We are one. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. Rochdale Council are guilty of corruption at the highest level. They need to resign. The reason being they blatantly ignored child abuse for the last 20 years. Not just one case, nor two, not even 3, but hundreds of cases of vulnerable children being taken by gangs of up to 20 men to be used for sex. The council is there to protect and has a legal duty to protect these vulnerable children. It failed in its duty to do that, and as such, its position is untenable. Therefore, Anonymous respectfully request they respect the democratic process and subject themselves to it. They must resign and inform the Electoral Commission of their decision to all resign and kickstart the democratic process in Rochdale. This is the only tenable and logical outcome of this scandal. Expect us on Thursday, the 4th of October, 2012. 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
State for the camera who you are and what you do.
Howdy, I'm John Hughes, roving reporter for the Yeovil Warbler. I report on today's issues happening in the fast-moving world of FB.
Are you part of Anonymous?
I'm very much part of Anonymous.
What is your role in Anonymous?
To promote Anonymous wherever I go, to fight corruption and seek the truth and promote the truth. And whenever we find child sex rings operating, to bring those responsible to accountability.
What are your plans in Anonymous for shutting down Rochdale Council on Thursday, 4th of October?
To protest there and petition the general public and get them on side of Anonymous, who are representing their best interests, and have the council resign because their position is now untenable, as they knew for 20 years about the child sex rings that were operating in their area. But because of race, it was a political hot potato, and they covered up. They covered up child sex abuse. They need to go.
How do you think Anonymous will be able to do this?
By petitioning the general public and engaging all members of all the community. We are all one. We are Anonymous. Expect us.
Do Anonymous plan on doing all major cities and councils all over the United Kingdom?
Where there is a need, Anonymous will be there. Our family army will travel far and wide wherever they're required.
Last question. Do Anonymous plan on going worldwide with their intentions?
They already have. People know Worldwide Anonymous. We are but part of it. We are all individuals, yet we are all one. Expect us.
Thank you.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the same with Fathers for Justice. Big organisations that can help this global problem. It's, is it ever going to stop? We wonder. It will do one day. You've just got to have a bit of a hope. I've not mentioned the website tonight, which is freethinkingvoice.org. That's free, F-R-E-E, thinkingvoice.org. You listen to the Afternoons Rebel Show with me, Andy Peacher, Kevin Bull, and our special guest tonight, Paul Manning. Right, guys. Are they not waking up? Can never get these.
Yeah. Just wanting to go back onto that very interesting comment that Kevin made about. I know the show is not about narcissism, but just a brief comment that once I'd been labelled as a narcissist, the first thing I did is I got home and researched the whole issue, and I came across a guy called Sam Vaknin, who's the world authority on narcissism, and he's a very, very famous, eminent professor on the subject. And online you can find out all the characteristics of what a narcissist is. To be actually labelled with NPD, though, is a different matter. Narcissistic personality disorder is not something I have been labelled with. I've just been called a narcissist. Whether or not my expert who saw me is accusing me of NPD, I don't think so. But in my defence, I put a list of questions for the barrister to ask her, such as, did I boast? Did I show any characteristics of not having empathy? Did I speak of ambition? Did I speak of always being right? I asked my barrister to put these questions, but that's the reason why I dumped her, because she was not willing to. And I wanted to expose the expert in asking these questions. And the reason is I wanted to do that is because I have an actual recording, a voice recording of my assessment. And at no time did I boast or say anything that could be construed as narcissistic. So it came as such a shock to me that I was labelled this way. In fact, I was completely dumbfounded and offended by it. But as you said, Kevin, once you study and research about these things, you learn more and more. And in my own defence, maybe I'm being narcissistic saying it, but I don't think I am narcissistic. Like you said, one of the main criteria is lack of empathy, and that is not something I've ever had in my life, is a lack of empathy for people.
Well, let me just add a little bit to this. I don't normally go into my own case ever, but I'll give you one thing from that which will cause you to realise how ridiculous these assessments are. And if you look at your case, it's pretty obvious how you're functioning to us here, that you're a very feeling guy, you're very motivated by your feelings in every way, otherwise you wouldn't be you're not doing it through hatred, Paul, it's in you. I can tell that you're doing this from an empathic viewpoint. It's so obvious to me. I can assure you that most of these assessments that are very short, whatever they draw as conclusions, we think, oh well, they're just fabricating the case. But I think there's a part of this is coming from the personalities of the assessors.
Yes.
It's very easy to project your own failings onto others in a powerful situation. And it is a powerful situation when you're assessing another person. Projection is a very well-known thing. It happens we always do it. We all do it to a certain extent. Where, examples of it, projection occurs around anger and things like that. And when we calm down, we can see that we don't quite hold the same view about someone. But if we've got something that's hurting inside, then we can get into situations, if someone presses our buttons, to almost accuse the other person of something similar, or in an emotional sense, it tends to happen. Now, when we've got these experts that are so cool, shall we say, they do tend to be very low empathy, and on the psychopathy or low empathy end of the spectrum, there's been a lot of coverage on this. And they're absolutely cold in many ways. They're not like the majority of us, the masses, who I think are about the healthiest people on the planet, to be honest. And they tend to be so cold and analytical that they're not addressing and looking at their own feelings enough to realise that they have feelings they're projecting. They're missing the point that they're projecting. And I know it's technical terms. A psychotic at the other end of the spectrum projects openly. A person who has low empathy projects silently. In other words, they've got the same issues, but they're not admitting to their own internal feelings to themselves in any way, but they still make decisions, even in a logical, intellectual way, that affect other people as a product of those projections. So once they're in a powerful position, you might get someone like you've described who doesn't have a lot of feeling for people, and then they're assessing you, and they say, oh, well, you're not very feeling, you're a narcissist, or you've got narcissistic tendencies, etc., etc. But they're in such a position of power and not being watched on this that I think your case is so obvious that the problem is not with you. I know you're arguing it, Paul. The problem is in the assessor here. Now, I'm going to quote my own case here. I'm not going to go into it in detail because I want to be very careful. I never ever do normally. Which is proved to be unfortunate. I have been assessed by a leading professor of neuropsychology. My wife's laughing here before I even start to explain this story. Many years ago, when things were ethical, as being in the superior range in intelligence and gifted, superior range is top 2%, gifted in pure intelligence, and I was considered in the main to be a threat. I'd made a medical complaint and they attacked me purely because of the medical complaint. It was so revealing. It was going, when it's eventually published, it'll show how they're labelling parents with mental health problems when they have physical illness problems, but we won't go there for tonight to deal with it. You can read a lot of this on Three Fingered Voice. Where I'm going to explain to you, one of the statements that came out after spending 14 days assessing me, and which I completely volunteered in, they drew the conclusions that I didn't have any symptoms at all, and they wrote every test down and no symptoms at all. And at the end of 14 days assessment, it should have been 5 days, and this was in a hospital. They had every chance to assess me. So what happened later on in the case, the same psychiatrist was called to the Court of England to give an account. And I have it in writing that he stated these words. He stated that he could not make a diagnosis of Mr. Ball because his superior intelligence got in the way. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's how far it can go with psychiatrists. And I assure you the problem was the other way around. The problem was that with my functioning being at that level, the psychiatrist could not assess me. So at best he could project, but he'd nothing to project against because of the fact my functioning was at that level. So the only explanation he could give to the Court of England to why after 14 days he still wanted to hold a view there was a problem was by that statement, that he couldn't make a diagnosis of Mr. Ball because his superior intelligence got in the way. How ridiculous can it get, Paul, and what chance have parents got if that's the point it can get to?
Incredible. So, I'm not. Was he basically saying then that he was so superior in his intelligence was way above yours or anybody that he couldn't give an opinion because he was super intelligent?
He was trying to say that because my intelligence had been assessed at that level, that he, in himself, saw that as getting in the way of making a diagnosis on me. Because he could not overview me. That's how ridiculous it is. You've got it, Paul. I know you got it because you're laughing. Ridiculous argument, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, talking about experts, quoting from John Hemming's initiative in his bill, it says here, quoting, he says, "The risk of injustice is further shown by a study of expert evidence used in the family court. 1/5 of expert psychologists were not deemed qualified. 2/3 of the reports reviewed were poor or very poor." And that evidence came from, as we all know, Professor Jane Ireland, who published her report in February of 2012. And I've been in contact with Professor Jane Ireland. numerous occasions, and asking her for help in my case, in lieu of the fact that she's exposed lots of psychologists' shenanigans and their psychobabble towards parents, but she's unfortunately told me that she can't get involved. But I have approached her, and she has spoken to me actually. But if it is that we have a good percentage of psychologists that bring poor reports to these cases, how on earth, on these reports, based upon these poor reports, can we possibly take children away from parents? It breaks my heart that these psychologists are being paid vast amounts of money for the psychobabble that they bring forth.
Psychobabble is a good term here.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm a great believer in psychology. Obviously, I wouldn't be a counsellor. It's part of what we do. But you must understand the type of people we see giving evidence in child proceedings for the state and giving, shall we say, evidence that is less than kosher are not the typical psychologists or psychiatrists or experts that we have across the board. The vast majority of psychologists and experts are absolutely fine. Then they wouldn't be attracted to even give evidence on this basis.
Well, I'm glad you say that. I'm glad
it is like that.
My only advice, though, for any parents listening who are being sent to go to an assessment, this might sound kind of suspicious, but my advice to you, having sat some, is say as little as possible. Answer the question directly and do not enlarge too much upon things. Just answer the question quite succinctly. And that's my advice. Don't enlarge too much if you are sent to one of these assessments, because the more you say, the more
they can make out of it.
Yeah, the more they can extrapolate from what you say.
Exactly.
And I assure you, the most simple of things can be extrapolated upon. I'll give you an example. I actually told my psychologist, Dr. Croxon, that I'd been in touch with Jane Ireland, and that's all I told her. But I wish I hadn't now, because in her report, she reported it as a threat. She saw it as a threat, and in my conversation with her, it was just basically in passing. Oh, I said, oh, you might know Jane Ireland. She's quite an eminent psychologist. And now I find out that she's mentioned it in the context of she saw that as a threat, that I was threatening her to report her to Jane Ireland. I did no such thing. So I made a mistake there.
Yeah, let me finish up. I was just rounding off the explanation on that. I didn't quite give you the final punchline on it. When I say that the massive psychologists, I'm not talking the psychologists in proceedings, what we've got is a Dutch auction with social services footing the bill and various legal companies footing the bill in privacy proceedings for these experts. And you have to understand what a Dutch auction is and how it works. If you've got a gravy train of experts before the courts, they don't get another bite of the cherry, or not many bites of the cherry, if they don't give the right evidence, okay? So if it doesn't fall in the favour of social services are going to go elsewhere, aren't they? They'll get another expert who does. That's a Dutch auction. So the most corrupt experts in a Dutch auction are the ones that are mainly before the courts, which is why we see them being caught out every so often and being found to be more than wanting in giving false evidence. So the very nature of the way that the experts are employed before the courts at the choice of the state, social services and local authority, causes the increasing corruption of the type of expert that's before the court that just sees finance. So what are these experts like? Well, these experts are narcissists, low empathy personalities and psychopaths that have one goal. They have no empathy for us. They have no empathy for anyone else. They just have selfish objectives. The same as criminals.
Right, can we just close on this note? Because we have to get ready for the next show host at 9 o'clock. Thanks, Paul, for coming, and thanks, as usual, Kev, for joining us. You've been listening to the Athens Rebel show with me, Andy Peacher, and Kevin Bull. It'd be nice to have you back sometime, Paul, but before you all go away, just remember, Rochdale tomorrow, 9 a.m. all day, outside the social services, Rochdale, Lancashire, Greater Manchester. Please show their support. Lincolnshire County Council, 10:30-ish, either way, 5 minutes. Show your support, and from the Earth News Rebel Show, we'll see you on Friday evening.